My altruism bound me in this prison. Motives lurking. Don't approach that intersection. Nervous. I'm lost if you're not doling me my props. A scared, agitated core. I'm alone with my thoughts. I'm alone with my thoughts. I'm alone with my thoughts. Ironic, found my altruism bound me in this prison. Local icon down and crawling in the bowels with the victim. Vocal, mic on, sound resounding, margins of the system. Ostracized, forgotten, dust them off without conditions. Motives lurking, heard them gurgling, murmuring at the surface. Forward motion, don't approach that intersection. Nervous, motor going, slow, encroaching, approaching the top. If I idle in the quiet, I'm alone with my thoughts. My title, my dream, be the cream of the crop. Strip me of my medals, I was dawn and ripped them off. Let up on that pedal, slowly rolling to a stop. Holding on, I'm lost if you're not doling me my props. Ill prepared for the storm, a scared, agitated core. Decidedly ignored, aggravated, buried in the corner. Excavation, hatred percolating, spilling over. Avoidance was the norm, anxiety is purest form. Facing my reflection, change direction. What I know, if I love enough, maybe I'll be lovable, important. That cloud of doubt will drift away, replaced with rays of hope. Alarms will stop, my heart will feel the calm I'm longing for. Distracted by a shiny thing, a gleam across the street. Serenity, oasis, affirmation flowing free. And adoration isn't fabricated, those feelings real. Temporary respite, acceptance, how I feel. Granted, it's a momentary fix where I can ponder why absence didn't exactly make the heart grow fonder. Failure to handle with care, careless, stranded in the dust. So I'm going over there to rest in this chair in the sun. The sun eventually sets, apparent when it's dusk. Pulled out of my chair, it isn't fair, it hurts too much. Face the situation, I hate it there, I'm stuck. Rumination gets you nowhere, what's done is done. Is grace sufficient? Is mercy enough? Strip it down to the studs and reconstruct the trust. Standing squarely on the rug pulled out from under me. And start this living in the present and calm my anxious heart. A gleam across the street, affirmation flowing free. I'm going over there to rest in this chair in the sun. Yeah, that chair in the sun. That chair in the sun. My chair in the sun. What's done is done. Mercy enough. Grace sufficient. Mercy enough. Grace sufficient. Is mercy enough. Grace sufficient.
I would like to welcome Bobby Bishop, a longtime friend of mine. God, how long have we known each other, Bobby? A long time now.
I mean, I think we met in 2000,
maybe?
Yeah, I think 05. Yep.
Yeah, so that's like a good 17 years now. Wow.
It's crazy.
And I want to talk about that song, the lyrical content of that song. And it's funny, like how many songs we've done, and I don't even think about it. Like we've done a lot of songs together.
We have.
I don't know, it's maybe 8, 9, 10, something like that.
Yeah, because you did a whole remix project,
the remix project.
Yeah.
So we've done a lot of music together, and we've had a million deep conversations.
Yeah.
Especially back, way back.
Mm-hmm.
And so for those who don't know Bobby, Bobby is a social worker. He's you do family therapy too, right?
Yep.
And also he's a rap artist. And he's made Christian hip hop for many years and performed in you did a lot of years, I would say, consistently in the genre, like in all the big what would you call them? I guess just the big events, the big like Christian concert events,
festivals and stuff.
The festivals.
Yeah.
I mean, you did all of those for I don't know, a good 5-6 years straight, maybe.
Yeah, it was.
Least?
As far as like the local one, the big one here, Soulfest. I was doing the math on that recently. I did 14 of those in a row.
Wow.
And then as far as there was a good like 5-year chunk of time where I was going around the country doing like a bunch of them. You know what I mean? And then I was for a couple years. There was one called 7 Project, which was like a public schools tour, and I was doing those like consistently every month. So yeah, but Soulfest, it was like I was like, wow, I did 14 of those, man, that's wild. So
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about the lyrics on the track. I'll probably
yeah,
play it again at the end, like when we finish up.
yeah,
But that was pretty deep, and me and you have had some conversations in that realm, and
yeah,
like the chair in the sun, and it reminded me, and I don't know, it's hard to see. You wrote that in a very clever way because it's not like you can 100%
right,
interpret what you're saying, but you can still relate to it as to those struggles that we all go through, where we go over here, we go over there. Is this enough? Is that enough? And
right,
that's actually been a constant theme in your music.
mm,
I've noticed it. I mean, you do all kinds of different stuff, but there's always like one or two on each project. I always feel
yeah,
like with
man,
that kind of vibe of that song we just played, and it's interesting because it reminds me of a conversation I had with Derek, who I do the show with like every
yeah,
Sunday, and it was we were having lunch, and we were just talking about different stuff, and I was having a tuna melt, and we were having all these, we always have these deep conversations and stuff, and we would kind of started joking about how it's all about just eating this tuna sandwich right now. That's what it's all about. You
yeah,
can go here, you can go there,
hmm,
and it reminds me a little of sitting in that chair.
yeah.
And I mean, I'm interpreting your work, so if
Oh,
you
you
can
got
throw
it.
something in there, but I even felt like the chair, because you even talk about going away from it a little
Hmm.
and coming back. Even when you're enjoying the tuna sandwich, there comes a moment when you don't want tuna right anymore, and you
Right.
kind of get off the chair.
I mean, that was kind of the idea in that I kind of took a risk in that Mike. Essentially, what happened was it turns out not as much the irony, but as there was a lot of years of just displacement of anxiety, and
Okay.
that altruism sort of took over, and it was my constant band-aid. I was helping people, helping, and I was completely avoiding my own stuff. And I had some stuff, and it was in the corner, and it sat in that freaking corner for a long time. Um, so that song was sort of my way of like, all right, how can I do this in a way where it can be hopefully deeply relatable, but at the same time, I'm gonna use this as uh, a therapy tool for me to kind of get this stuff out, right? So I had trauma. Uh, it was particularly this one incident over 20 years ago, and I shoved it. You know what I'm saying? And it came firing back at me like full steam ahead.
Yeah, it's
Like,
funny how that works,
ooh, I
and it's
mean,
and it's funny how it usually often takes 20 years. Isn't that something? It
it
takes that
knocked me
long
off
for
my
that
feet.
stuff.
It was
Yeah.
it literally knocked me off my feet. It was one thing triggered me, and I lost it. And
Wow.
it took a few years. It took a few years of therapy and just working through a lot of things within my family and everything and finally got to a point where I'm like, all right, I can actually process this artistically now that I've actually done all the responsible pieces as far as self-care and everything else. You know what I mean? But yeah, like the idea was, okay, let's take this metaphor because in that case, as far as that chair in the sun, for me, it was that it wasn't always as much a mindfulness thing as it was. I was always grabbing these distractions, sometimes unhealthy ones, sometimes
Hmm.
people even, and just like pouring into that situation, whatever it may be, in order to avoid what was really going on. It's like, oh, let
Yeah.
me let me just put this band-aid on it again, 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 again. You know, and it's like, I'd rather go sit in the chair, but like you said, it runs its course, and then you're still left holding the bag. You know, so um, that was the idea. I was hoping the listener could extract that from it and relate to it,
Yeah.
even though the circumstances are going to be different for everybody.
Yeah. No, it was definitely well done, man. I
Thank you,
thought it
bro.
was really well done, and it's interesting too that like with art and with literature, whatever, you can interpret even situations how I see it, basically from my lens and things that I'm thinking about now. And then when you explained it, it's still similar, but it's in a different context,
Sure.
which is cool how you wrote it. You know, where it can be grasped wherever you're sitting right now. There's a situation like that where you can that chair can be symbolically put into that situation, because that's how we grow and we go through things where, you know, we go to that chair, we come away, we go to it, we come away, you
Right.
know, and it's like this process, you know. So it was pretty dope.
Thank you. That beats fire, man. As soon as you
Thank
sent
you,
me that,
man.
I fell in love with it. So
Thank you.
no
So
question, man.
I think like
Old reliable dog, really.
thank you, man. So like one of the things too that I want to mention is like I mean, we haven't talked in a while.
Yeah,
And we used to talk a lot.
we
Like
did.
when when I was trying to make my way sort of in the Christian circles, like you were literally my best friend.
Mhm.
You absolutely were, Bobby,
Yeah,
and I want to
man. I
thank you for
appreciate
that,
that.
because it can be a really judgmental place, and you were like one of, and I'm not the only one, but one of the few who were like not religious, you know, in quote, you know, not to go into what's religious and everything, and go into that now, but you were just, you know, like, all right, cool, you know, Shock came from, you know, the mainstream. He's trying to do this, and you were like encouraging, and you were cool about it. And I mean, I remember even times you took me to a radio station, and the guy was like, you know, you used to do the devil's music and all this stuff, and you I noticed that you used to kind of like take me with you to spots or to situations, and you would kind of know what was going to happen maybe, and you would kind of try to shield me from it, like, don't listen to him, you know, this and that, you know, yeah,
Uh,
that's, don't worry, that's not really. So you would almost anticipate it, and you were kind of like, you know, trying to be like sort of a referee in between it, so you soften the blows a little bit. And
that's
I
what's up.
appreciate that, man, because
Yeah, man.
I mean, you know, there's all kinds out there, you know, in any circle, and it was definitely something I needed, because it was a difficult time, and a lot of my trauma that I've worked on as I got older
Mm.
came from, you know, the situations I was in at that time. You know, I don't know if I even ever told you, but you know, it ended up, you know, the church I was in. I don't know if we ever really spoke on it, but it was actually basically a cult that I was in.
So I
And
remember. Well, just to reciprocate your sentiment, I feel the same way. It essentially it really it's always humbling, but also just kind of there's something really just there's consolation in the idea that even though sometimes life goes through seasons, when you have a connection like that, you can just kind of pick it back up.
oh
And but
yeah,
also as accountability, like man, I actually I should have not let this one kind of dissipate like that. You know, as far as taking for granted the fact that we have this bond. You know what I mean? So because I feel the same way. You one of the real ones, and the realist in that season, absolutely.
thank you,
So
man.
I appreciate that about you as well, man.
Well, that's what's cool about those relationships. Like, see, I don't
Yeah,
even worry. You know,
right.
like I know that, like I didn't even worry about prepping or anything, and I knew I hadn't talked to you in a long time, but I know the relationship we have, and I know that it can be picked up at any
Yeah,
moment, and
no
it's
doubt.
it we never missed a step, and
Absolutely,
it's always
man.
been that way. We've done that. We haven't. There's times we didn't talk for a couple years. We get on
Yeah,
the phone, and we're there for 2 hours, and it's just like a
yep.
great conversation.
Always.
And so that's actually another a thing, you know, for people listening too. I'm sure, you know, they have relationships like that too, and those are the ones really to treasure. You know, like
Hmm.
those ones are special because they don't take. It's kind of, isn't it interesting how the most special relationships, they don't even take a lot of work.
Yeah,
They just are. And then you have all
yeah.
these other ones that are usually, for the most part, hurtful, dysfunctional,
Mhm.
and they take mad work, and they don't
Yeah,
even bear a lot of good fruit in your life. But the
yeah,
relationships that are like almost you don't have to tend to, they just they just are automatically like a connection, like like those two things just click together. They don't even take a lot of effort, and it's something interesting to think about, you know.
no, but it's definitely as I think, and you and I are around the same age.
Hmm.
Um, I think there's perspective as we get a little bit older too, especially into our 40s, and as far as recognizing, like looking back, like man, there were people that I almost like had no business even trying to be friends with, because from the beginning you have that gut feeling like, hold up,
Yeah,
this is off, and you still try to force it and force it. It's like, why did I not follow that gut feeling that I had
man.
from Rip?
So, oh
You
my
know?
gosh, you know how many times I've thought that about many things, and it's
Yeah,
interesting
man.
too because one of the things, like in the cult was the intellect was evil, your
Mm,
heart is deceitful. There was like a lot of twisting of that, and it kind of got me accustomed to not
mm,
listening to the gut.
sure.
And then I look back and I'm like, man, but my gut was on fire. It was smarter than my brain. My brain could be
Sure.
manipulated. You could call it your gut, your heart, your soul, your whatever that what people call it a million things. The
Right.
chakra, right in the center,
Yep.
whatever you want to call it. But that sense, that innate knowing, like that you don't need an explanation. You don't need someone to tell you everything about the situation. You just somehow know. It's like
Yeah.
it's smarter than you.
Yeah.
And it's funny, as I got old, I'm old, like you said, you get older, you look back and you have perspective. That is that is the greatest gift as humans we have. This
Yeah.
sort of
Intuition.
intuitive
Yeah.
thing that just sits there, that kind of loves you and is like, nah, this ain't it.
Right.
This ain't it. And
Right.
and but damn it, we don't listen to that. It's
No.
so often we don't listen to it.
I know why I didn't always listen. I didn't always listen out of selfish ambition. It might have been masked
Mm,
as pure intent, but if there was down the road even a glimmer of an opportunity, I
I
think that
got
I
you.
was drawn to that. So I would justify someone's bad behavior based on, well, no, no, just press in because there could be reward here.
Yeah, I can
Um,
relate to that.
and I have to be honest with myself
Sure.
about that. Like, hey, I'm not like an innocent party in all these situations. You know what I mean? There's
Yeah.
personal responsibility you got to take in some of those situations.
Yeah, that's a jewel too, because I've been thinking about that a lot. Where I'm working on a book now, basically about everything that happened
Yeah.
during that time. It's called "The Gift Wrapped Up in a Nightmare,"
Mm,
and basically a big part of it at the end is what you're talking about the villain. So you have this villain or in your life, let's say we all have one, and then but you also got to acknowledge that you're also the
yeah.
villain in someone's
Hmm.
life.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like what you're saying. It's like you're taking that responsibility. Like, wait a second, I wasn't 100% innocent. So in my case in particular, I was the villain for that person also.
Mm,
And but then what is it that you do with they could have used, in my opinion, me as their villain to better do life and the situation, and I could have used I ended up, it was hard and it took a long time, but I did end up using them to completely learn and identify. It was sort of that's why it's the gift wrapped up in a nightmare, because it's a bad
mm,
situation that ends up teaching me things about myself I never knew, making me stronger, finally actually loving myself. Like, all
right.
this stuff through that process, actually, I ended up, with having possession of the things I always wanted to begin with. And,
It, it's
but you
funny
have
how
to
we learn.
acknowledge.
You have to acknowledge you're right, and I think that the advantage that we might have is that if you take on an attitude of, all right, I've been hurt, I've also caused pain. I'm not going to waste, like, I can't control what the other person does other than I can repent, right? I can take steps to acknowledge my missteps, and even if it's not like a reconciliation that mends the relationship, at, at the very least, um, reach out. and acknowledge, like, okay, here's where I messed up. I I repent for that. These were my mistakes. But then on my end, as far as I can't control if they're going to reciprocate that. You know what I mean? As
Right.
far as
Right.
taking ownership of their end, but I'm not going to waste that pain either, because now
Hmm.
I'm wiser for it. And like you said, you extract things about yourself that you maybe didn't recognize or have um, decidedly want to change, and you didn't necessarily recognize you didn't identify them before, and now
Yeah.
they've been identified, and now it's time to grow from that. I'm not going to waste this pain, no way, because it hurt too much, so I am not wasting it.
That's a song right there, Bobby.
Word up,
I'm not
word
gonna
up.
waste this pain. No way.
Yeah, man, no
That's a
doubt,
hook.
no doubt.
That's a hook, man. Yeah, and I agree with you, man. And I think also like the whole dynamic, of a villain learning from and just reframing that, just reframing it. It really can. I know it's, for people out there, if someone's listening, like, this person did this to me, this person, and that's how it starts. It has to start there because you got to get
Right.
this anger, you got to
Hmm.
identify this thing, but then from there, it can go into a good place. It really can.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so another thing that Bobby does, people out there listening and watching, is he's a social worker, and he works with high school kids, right?
Yeah.
And I'm very, very interested selfishly here
Let's
because
get
I
it.
have a 13-year-old who's stuck in the house, who used to be very active, who is struggling with sleep patterns, just all kinds of stuff. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure everybody is. Motivation, the safe haven for all the kids is gaming, getting on there, talking to each other,
Hmm.
having that community. But to an extent that is certainly not the best version of community, right? And
Right.
a lot of kids are struggling, and I was just curious for me to just shut up and listen to you on your take on what's going on with kids, and maybe we can even get into, let's just flow with that, and see where we go.
Yeah, man. Yeah, so just a little context. So the high school that I'm at is in our city in Lynn, Massachusetts. So regarding the various groups of kids and how they're collectively dealing with this pandemic and socially how this is affecting them, um, there isn't a broad stroke that I could put over them. I mean, I can start with so many different things. I mean, they're the obvious things as far as how you differentiate between kids, as far as like I was touching on before we started the podcast. There are some kids that are high functioning in classes where they're accustomed to being like AP courses, honors classes, and perhaps have a family dynamic that nurtures that. And then there are other kids who were already just surviving, and this has become school has become something that is not even remotely high on their list as far as surviving right now. So, like our demographics, and Lynn, I know we've talked about this because I think as far as socioeconomic um, disparity, as far as that gap, that chasm, Yonkers and Lynn aren't that different in that way. I think Yonkers might have, from what I gathered, might have like a high end that Lynn might not have, but there's definitely like a line that you can draw down a section of our
Yeah.
town where I would argue that's another town over there. You know,
Yeah, I agree. Just from the little visit I did once over there,
yeah, you
I
came
definitely
down.
agree with you.
Um, and what happens is these kids grow up in their neighborhoods in elementary school, in middle school, and then when they come together, converge in the high school level, the kids who grew up, it's called Ward 1, is kind of the more middle class area. Those kids now come to the high school with the rest of the kids who grew up in the central and the city part of Lynn, and they're somewhat under the impression that they've grown up in the same town in their mind, and they really didn't. They grew up in arguably a different world. Um, so our as far as the people groups in my high school, I actually know the demographics as part of my not only my job, but it's part of my also my passion. If I'm really going to get to know population, I want to know everything about it, right? So we're 15% black, 15% white, about 10% Asian, and then 60% Latino. So I got that math right. 60, yeah, that's 100. So there are within that, those groups of kids, there are kids whose families have been here for generations. There are kids whose families have been here for maybe their first generation. And then we have a huge group of kids right now that's growing every year who are here without their parents that are that have come, a lot of them, most of this one group that I'm talking about have come from one area of Guatemala, and they've come over unaccompanied, and then have been resettled through a sponsorship in Lynn, and they're doubled up as far as their living situation. So they're responsible for their own finances on top of all of these other expectations.
Wow.
So if you're 16 years old and you also have no choice but to work 40 hours a week in order to keep yourself going, when a pandemic hits and you're handed a computer, like, oh, now do this here.
That's
You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not my priority right now. I'm trying
I
to
would
stay
just in that situation
saying?
I would not even be like, what can you say to a kid who tells you I got to put this laptop down because look, I'm dealing with a lot of stuff. What can you say? I mean, I'm like, literally, you're the person. So what could you say to a kid like that? I mean, there's not much.
It's taking strategy and then rewriting the strategy and then rewriting the strategy. So we're finally at a place we've pinpointed a
Okay.
select group of those kids who we feel that have been falling through the cracks because we see that they're not logging in every day. We're calling,
Okay.
we're having a hard time getting them and things like that. And unfortunately, we're not in a place where we can ethically just go knock on doors because of the pandemic. So in some cases, we found ways to do that. But what it's come down to is when we finally successfully, nailed some of these kids down, we got permission to open up a section of our school for them, and we set up partitions and everything. We're like, okay, you guys do come to school. I know school's not open, but for you guys it is. So that's what we've actually just started implementing for them for the rest of the year, because we're like, we can't let them, like, we're gonna lose them, and we can't do that ethically.
That was
We
great.
can't allow that to
was
happen.
great, man.
So that's been
So
the
you
new,
gave them you worked on a certain area of the school. You gave them a place. That's great.
Yeah,
man.
they have their own spot now, and it's giving me a nice opportunity. I'm responsible for the social emotional wellness of the entire school as a whole, like overarching. And historically, it would be tough for me to seek a ton of kids out because there was already a line out the door. Because the kids would come to me as I had an office, so I was busy, and those kids were a part of that. A lot of those kids, but I never have had the opportunity until now. Like we were talking about not wasting pain. I'm like, the pandemic's horrible here, but right now is an opportunity because I don't have a physical office where kids are lining up, that I can focus on this one group of kids right now.
Yeah, who probably, I mean, they all need it, but they need it. It's sort of like an emergency room.
It is.
This person over here is in real trouble, like right now, this second. This one is bad, but they can hold on for a little while longer. It's kind of like sounds like you set it. That was the ER you set up, basically.
It's essentially what's going on.
Or like we watch Chicago Med and they call it Baghdad.
Yeah, that's kind of what's going on,
Yeah.
So we're hoping it sticks. We just got that piece of it rolled out just within the past 2 weeks. So once we get off of the break we're on now, I'm going to take that opportunity to make sure that, like, each of those kids is hearing from me, a few times a week. or are going in because they're still doing their online classes, but they're in a room doing it with their partition, so that there's always a face and someone that they can communicate with
Yeah.
every day. It's not a message that they're receiving on a messenger or
I
a phone
I can't
call
even
through a phone call.
fathom
You
how
know?
hard it must be for those kids because I mean, it's my son, he's 13, and I'm noticing, it's hard for him, and he has a mom and a dad who are pretty present.
Yeah,
So now, and we're almost out of, what can we do? We're almost in that place. I mean, there's always something like you can do, but it feels like, there's only so much you can do. There are confines that you have to deal with, and the kids you're talking about, man, my heart goes out to them because I mean, like you said, they already were in a situation that was difficult. So then you just stack this on there, and
right.
it's close to impossible. Not
It's
impossible, but
felt that way.
close.
Well, considering this is why they came. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously, there's turmoil in this one area called San Marcos where they're from. Their lives were in danger, a lot of them. So that's the main reason they came. But also the hope of opportunity was a huge part of this. And
yeah,
now the
sure.
opportunity is like, where's it at? But what you're talking about too, man, I've been dealing with this every day as well, as far as those kids that were able to socially function on some level until this pandemic hit. And suddenly there are the variables. I'm sure your kids have dealt with this. The way our situation is set up is they have their classes and then they go into these folders and there's their assignments. And before, they had some wiggle room throughout their school day. Okay, if I need to get some help, I don't understand this, I can raise my hand, I can talk to the teacher, I can go off to class, I can go after school, I can go get this tutor. And by the time they go home, they're not overwhelmed with, oh, look at all this work I have to do. They've accomplished a lot of it, or at least have had the opportunity to comprehend some of the content.
Yeah,
Now, their anxiety is so high being on that stupid Zoom call to even raise their hand and be on blast that they're like, I'm not raising my hand. I'm not even turning my camera up. So classes are done at whatever 12:30, and then they have allotted time in the afternoon to do their work, but they got to go
yeah,
in the folder and kind of figure it out for themselves, and they're
and
not
that's
accustomed to learning this way,
yeah,
man. It's
yeah.
overwhelming. It's like a brick
I
wall in front of them. It's horrible.
I see that. I see that, and I see that it's different because like you said, and I can even think of myself when I was a kid. I can relate to what you're saying. Even if I didn't get something, I wouldn't even raise my hand because I know, like, I would have a friend who was really good at that, let's say,
Sure.
and I would just be like, I'm not gonna raise my hand right now. I'm just gonna, pick up whatever I can, and then I would just go to my friend and be like, Yo, what was she talking about with
Right.
oh, he'd be like, oh, that's this. No, that's it's this, and then he would just kind of explain to me, and he'd be like, yeah, and I'd be like, oh, okay, and I felt better with that. And I was the type of kid who didn't really want to ask the teacher. I was, so I
Right.
can relate to that.
And you exacerbate that. My argument is that's exacerbated, like multiplied so many times
Yeah,
on Zoom because everyone's looking at you.
yeah,
Like
you're
if
in the
you
center,
know you're at the
and and
center.
and you know what's crazy? That like let's say those you're in the high school, so those teen years is like the peak of not wanting to be that guy
Right.
in your life. Like that's the peak the
Yeah.
in your whole life, that's peak level. I don't want to be that guy. Like I
Facts.
just want to kind of fly under the radar, be with my friends and kind of like get through this. I don't want no very few. I mean there's a rare few who academic life they just embrace, and it's just it's fun to them. They love it. It just works. The system works for them the way it's set up. And for those kids, I can imagine it wouldn't be as much of a burden because they may embrace it more, because it's their thing.
Right.
It's what they do. And but for the many who it's not what they do, it just gets exponentially more difficult.
More difficult. And the kids that already were struggling with social emotional wellness They already had diagnoses, things like that. This has, I've seen this go one of two ways. Either they're kids who might be reaching out to me, I've realized, that may not have otherwise, because they have the shield of a messenger system, that they
Mm,
don't feel the anxiety of having to show up at my
that's a
door.
good side, actually.
So that part has been great. Um, I've been trying to look at the positives, right? Uh, but there are, and we still have a clinic. We still have a mental health center through a local service provider that's housed within our, like, under our roof. So I'm able to still do the same referrals and things like that. But there are other kids that, um, and I think this is kind of where what you were getting at too. I feel like any opportunity to join a group or express themselves subculturally has gone away.
Yeah.
So they're just behind their screen and they're on the
Yep.
internet, and a lot of them are delving into the online chat rooms. And even I have one kid who, there's a gaming site he goes to, that there's this super, super dark corner of it that he's jumping in every night. Um,
Oh wow.
and I've had to have all kinds of talks with his mom, who thinks that he's just doing normal teenager stuff. And I'm like, I'm telling you, it's dark. Um, as far as her protecting him, because what it's doing is it's exacerbating his. It's obvious what his diagnosis is too, and in trying to convince her of this, I'm like, he's ticking every box, and I made a million referrals. I'm telling you, take that computer away from him at night, because he's going somewhere he shouldn't be going. You know, it's things like that. There's more opportunity now for them to do that, because they feel like they feel responsible for their own, on some level. They have that, any of us that need to be social, but a lot of them are finding it in the wrong place right now.
Yeah, but the crazy thing is there's not that many other places to go. That's the thing.
Right,
So
right.
like even with our son, we've grown accustomed to, like, there's a cutoff time, and my wife is really good at this. I'm If it weren't for her, like, we balance each other out.
Yeah,
She's more the strict one, and then I'm more the reasoner and trying to understand, and that's more me. And but thankfully she's been, like, really good with being able to, like, say, at this time, she turns off the phone privileges, because you can do it with the parenting controls.
yeah,
And then at this time, I want you to bring your laptop, so there's no access to that stuff late at night. But
right.
but now he's on vacation. It's difficult to balance, because now he's on vacation, so we want him to feel like he's on vacation. So we gave him a little more freedom.
Yeah, makes sense.
It's difficult, it's very difficult. So actually, Erica's got a comment here. Let's see. I work at the Board of Education. I get parents that want to change schools because their kids are struggling in multiple subjects, and parents feel that a teacher or teachers don't seem to care or acknowledge that maybe there's something going on. Have you encountered students or parents with these types of situations?
Um, Let me just reread it here to make sure I
Yeah.
understand. Sure. Yeah, I think there are a number of factors when it comes down to the perceptions, all around on the teacher side of it. And even though I'm technically in the teachers union, I'm one of one in my building as far as the social workers. So I don't have to conduct a classroom every day. The closest thing I have to do to a classroom setting is, I run an anti-racism club after school. So I have a lot of kids in that group, but I I'm not in the shoes of the teachers who are responsible for multiple classrooms every day. And I think what's happening, at least on our end, is there's nihilism on the teacher's end, so for the ones who are becoming kind of like increasingly nihilistic, the parents who are involved heavily, like Erica is talking about, are
Mm-hmm.
getting hip to it. And they're like, wait, we're accustomed to you being more available than you actually are. And I think some of the teachers are burning out. Yes.
Okay.
And so does it come across as them not being aware or refusing to acknowledge what's actually going on? I see both ends. I see teachers that are pressing through and refusing to allow this to defeat them because they care about those kids. And those are the ones where I'm seeing results regarding uh, pinpointing individual kids and making a plan for that kid. Okay, and coming together as a team. What can we do to help this kid individually? What are we going to do academically? We're going to do social emotionally. What are we going to do here to make sure he doesn't sink, she doesn't sink? But there are those other teachers that are shrugging their shoulders right now because they're in a union and they're protected by a union, and they know that you really can't do anything to get them out of there right now. So they're
Yeah,
just like,
you know what's interesting?
yeah,
That I'm not going to shout this guy out, but there's a particular teacher, and my wife's watching,
yeah,
and she'll know who I'm talking about. But he's completely just threw his hands up. I mean, I've listened in on the class, not even on purpose, not like I'm spying, but the class is pretty rowdy, and they're just the stuff they're talking about. It has nothing to do with the subject. He's playing videos. They're joking around. And I think that's fine for sure. I'm not saying you should never do that. But he's just doing it a lot. Like it's a like it gets and I think understandably my son to the point where he's like, it's just ridiculous. What's the point? You know?
yeah. I think a lot of them are just, and it's unfortunate because, in my opinion, and again, I'm not speaking disparaging about any one individual. It just as a theme, regardless of circumstances, the truth of the matter is we're all in this situation right now. Like you're
Yeah.
not special. We're all in it.
Yeah,
So
that's a fact.
make a
And
decision. Either go in or have no pride. Pick one. But if you're going to go in, this is your job. So either take some pride in it and do it to the best of your ability. When everything's pushing back at you, including parents who are saying, "What are you going to do to help my kid?" or give up. But if you're going to give up, don't come crying when you're not prioritizing the future when it comes down to opportunity, because
yeah.
they're not going to think of you because they're going to remember when you stop caring. So
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think and to be fair to the teachers too. What's up, Ivan? So to be fair to the teachers too, I'm guessing a lot of them maybe were on the just like we're talking about the kids. Some of them and applying the principle we were talking about earlier. You this is the villain, but if you got to take everybody in and I'm sure some of those teachers were on the edge to begin with. Maybe something in their lives, different things, and then this just they were almost ready to throw their hands up to begin with maybe, and then this just kind of was like, all right, that's it. I don't know what to do with this right now, and maybe even also too kids adjusting more easily, I guess, to the technology part of it, whereas I'm gonna think it's safe to say some of the teachers probably are having more of a challenge
yeah,
with the technology, because I do remember in the beginning, some of them didn't like, we used Teams, and some of them didn't want to go on Teams. Some of them wanted to do emailing. It was very confusing in the very beginning, but they all kind of, to streamline everything and like organize it, they're like committed to Teams. But I'm thinking that those who felt weird about technology that got committed to it, probably that's another thing on top of everything. Like, wait a second, now this and maybe they constantly having trouble with. And another thing too, some teachers don't communicate the same in
it's true.
writing as they do talking.
100%.
And I think a lot of the interactions have become talking to each other by chat or by email, and they don't convey the information as clearly as they do when they talk. And I think that's also another stumbling block that they didn't have before. It's a new thing to deal with for that person who maybe always knew they had that trouble, but now it's a tool they need, and they just don't have it. So that's
I
something
totally
too.
agree. I totally agree. And I actually saw there's this one teacher that my impression of her and her reputation is so impeccable, and she's so invested in her job. And I saw something she posted the other day, and I almost had to read it twice because she was kind of at the point where she's like, I can't do this anymore, man. So
Wow.
on the other side of me, to sound overly harsh in my assessment, in that you're absolutely right. Um, there is a skill set that's been built over years, and if they're honing it, um, and they to the point where they've mastered their craft, and then suddenly they're asked to do it differently on that level, especially when you don't really know. And this is the part I have experienced even just with the club I run. Suddenly the cameras get flipped. You're talking, you don't know if they're listening or not. And I know different schools have different like rules with this, but I think
Yeah.
in a lot of cases they're choosing their battles. But to be talking to an empty room, hoping they're
Yeah.
listening on their end,
Yeah.
must make you want to pull your hair out if you're doing that day
Well,
in
yeah,
and day out. You
and
know what I'm
and
saying?
well, add to that they're kids, they're
They're
teenage
kids.
kids,
Hmm.
and they're hard to pull into the subject matter when
Yeah,
you're present,
right.
when they're there right there in front of your face and they're like drawing. Now you've they're in a whole other location.
Yep,
They're online. They have access to watch and stream a million different films and everything, and,
yep,
and different series and stuff while they're in class.
right.
And it's crazy. I think we
Yeah,
got
man.
something here from Ivan. It says change is hard. Are you seeing kids succumb to COVID fatigue as much as adults?
Um, as far as the pandemic in general, or actually having had COVID, and now they have the after effects. What do you, or just in general?
Oh,
Do you think
sorry,
he
this is
just means
another
the
one.
pandemic? Yeah,
I think he might mean the pandemic in
the
general.
pandemic.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and I'll just use myself as an example. I was talking about as far as seeing the teachers that kind of throw their hands up. I myself have had certainly, I'm no innocent party here. I've had weeks where I'm more engaged, and maybe one or two kids kind of breathe some life and some wind in my sails, and I'm like, okay, you know what? You reset, you realize what you're doing, you keep going, and you push in. But I've had other weeks where I'm like, dang, I've wore this hoodie 3 times this week. I'm not so invested this week. I'm a little bit apathetic, more than a little bit. So yeah, I've definitely seen it. I've definitely seen it from adults, and I think it is understandable. Um, I think the advantage, like I said, that I have is I have a really strong team around me, separate even just from my building, and that there's I have peers that are in all the other schools who I can kind of reach out to as a lifeline, right?
Hmm.
But not all of the teachers. I sometimes I wonder, and just adults in general, in whatever professional situation they're in within the school department. I don't know if everybody necessarily has that same level of support that I have. That's an advantage that I've had, even as far as my superiors and whatnot. But but yeah, I'm not sure if I answered the question exactly how what he
Yeah,
was looking for there,
I
but
think
yeah,
generally,
it's
yeah.
it's real. It's real.
Yeah, and I would even say, and I think I get almost common sense says that uh, teenagers not even having a fully developed brain, biologically yet, far less experience, are going to have a harder time just to do the adjusting that us adults who have a
Yeah.
lot of stuff to go back and compare and say, well,
Hmm.
I've been through this adversity and this reminds me of that a little, and I can use the tools I developed in that situation. Now the kids haven't even developed tools yet,
No.
to deal on this level. So
You and
But
I have been on the
it's
same wavelength for so long, bro. Like it's funny. Like
yeah, man.
that's kind of where I was going with it. I've had this conversation. I've really broken it down to kids like this. I say, listen, here's some advantages that we have as adults over you as a teenager. Time. I've had more time to learn how to build, to learn how to react to circumstances and to build resiliency. And not to mention, I have biology on my side
Yeah,
because
yeah,
my prefrontal cortex has developed.
yeah.
Yours has not. So you're running off your amygdala, which is your emotional center. So everything is emotion right now. I said, I don't say, I even say this to the kids. I say, I'm not saying this to be patronizing. It's science,
Yeah, yeah. No, it's good to
And it,
actually, you know what though? I
yeah,
appreciate that what you're saying because at least you're
yeah.
recognizing it. You know, if someone
It's
goes and
tough.
deals with them on our level, it's just not. It's not. It's literally not fair. It's
No,
it's technically not fair. It's not even a thing of you're being soft or you're being this or you're being that. It's really
no,
not fair. They don't have the tools. So,
no, they don't have
uh,
them yet.
Erica's got another question. Let's see.
Yeah.
She says, "Thank you, Bobby. What would you advise or recommend students who are making an effort to get a good grade, but their teacher won't budge and be flexible?"
Yeah. So the best the best thing that I've been able to do. So I don't know who else you guys have in your building as a resource. I have found that sometimes um, for a student to have another ally to speak on their behalf, to accentuate what they've already asked, or to maybe explain differently as far as articulating their needs. So I've done
Okay.
this with a lot of kids where they'll say, "Oh, I'm struggling in this class. The teacher's not listening to me." And I'll ask them to break down, tell me specifically what is the obstacle, like what assignment, what this, what, like, I want the specifics of the assignment and what you're missing and where aren't you being heard and where aren't they budging. And then I'll kind of go on behind them, not to undercut them, but to kind of like to, so that now there's two people moving in that direction.
Got you.
And I mean, I guess part of it, I know you would be the same way, as far as there's a way I can massage it with the teacher where they're not going to take offense to it. It's just like, hey, it's just me, the guy who supports the kids just like you do. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You can kind of sandwich it in a way that it's palatable so that they don't take offense to it. And I have found that has helped a bunch of times
Yeah,
this year.
we've
Um,
I think me and Erica have kind of done that with with someone else, kind of like where we more deal with a different person than that teacher,
Yeah.
let's say, and that they're kind of become a mediator and between everything, and that's what we've kind of done. It's a little, but I guess you're limited, in options, and it was also the best thing that we could come up with. Ivan has a comment here. Just gonna read it.
I mean, even if it's a vice principal, if it's a guidance counselor, if it's a social worker, like to have
Yeah.
just another person
Well,
who has a relationship.
I didn't want to give it away, but it is a vice principal.
Yeah, if as
Yeah.
long as it's somebody.
And we have a long. I mean,
Yeah.
he's been in the school for 8 years, so
Yeah.
we have
Yeah,
a long
oftentimes that
relationship.
helps. I
So
think it helps because there's accountability there that way too. And you know how to. I mean, you're from where you're from, Mike. Like you know how to effectively. How do I put it? Where you're not putting somebody on blast. It's not an empty threat. You know how to massage a situation so that everybody wins, right?
yeah,
You
yeah,
know how to do
sure.
that. You know how to talk to people. Not as a manipulation and not on some sucker stuff. It's
Just to
it's just like, hey,
just the only way to get it done, really.
but to still be aggressive because you're
Mhm.
convicted, like because it's your kid. You're like, listen, I have to advocate for this person because
Yeah.
it's my person, So
Yeah, and we've made that a habit throughout both our kids' school life. That's what we do. That's our job. We kind of decided that
no.
early on that we're going to do that, and sometimes we have to be aggressive,
You have to
and
be
sometimes we don't. And if we can get around it, it's kind of a thing. So I think this was going back to the COVID when you were talking about the fatigue. Ivan says I could relate we have to give everyone wiggle room in these times. Feeling it hard to keep my head above water on emotional level.
Yeah.
So, and you know,
I agree,
and the
Ivan.
thing is, if guys like Ivan is a longtime friend of mine,
Yeah. I see
super,
that he always comments on when you put.
yeah,
He's always in there.
he's
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
super smart
Yeah.
guy. He's I have a super high amount of respect for him. He's strong. I could compliment him all
Yeah.
day long. And
No
if he's
doubt.
saying that,
Yeah.
you know, successful, accomplished, written a book, you know, full of wisdom, and he's saying that, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So it's just, you know, it's where we are. It's just where we are. It's
Here we are.
apparently where we are. It's just our situation, you know.
There's it's a I run the even just being on this trip, right? This is the first vacation we've taken since this thing started, and I had to emotionally prepare myself because I was talking about the baggage that was in the corner that I unpacked. I'm like, I'm running the risk of having too much time in my head on vacation. So even just personally, as far as my own emotional health, I had to prepare myself and pray for this. And I've been practicing constant mindfulness techniques this entire trip. You know, even just walking around today,
Wow.
we were at Animal Kingdom, and the whole time, it's funny because looking at me, you would know this is going on, but I'm just sitting there going, "Stay here, man! Like, stay right here." Because what I found is that in years past, when I took these trips, even as my kids asked me for details about when I was a kid and what was your family vacation like or whatever it was. And because there's trauma attached to a lot of that, I forgot so much of it, man, because I was on such high alert back then. So I was on such high alert in those moments that I forgot the vacation.
Isn't that
so
something?
I'm like, I'm remembering this one. Forget that. You know what I mean? And so go ahead.
Yeah,
go
that's
ahead.
something. That's amazing. Ivan just had a little comment here. I think teachers, administrators need to be flexible and realize that we're living in unprecedented times. I can't imagine sitting in front of a computer for 6 hours, let alone a sub-adult. Yeah,
Real talk.
yeah, I completely agree with that. You know, and it's definitely something. You know, but it's everyone. You know, and we really got to work together.
Yeah.
I
We do.
at the end of the day, you know, there's different things and communication, working together. And I think also too, anxiety can get unreasonable now because I think as you know, parents, you know, there's this normal flow of parenting a kid in school to want them to do better, to keep an eye on them, and then there's this normal flow of teacher.
Right.
And then there's this normal flow of kid.
Mm-hmm.
And none of those exist.
Right.
So then the parent can't do what the parent normally does. And that can become an anxiety for the parent because the parent is trying to do what the parent always does in situations, but they can't. The kid is trying to do what the kid always does, but can't. The teacher's trying to do what the teacher always does, but can't. So it's
because all the circumstances have changed.
Yeah,
So it's
completely.
like, oh, hold up, we're rewriting this we're rewriting the blueprint here. Like
Everything.
And by the time I feel like we kind of maybe have a grasp on it,
we're gonna
hopefully
go.
we'll be out of this thing.
That's you know it's so funny you said that because I was thinking about that recently. I was like, you know, in life when I think I don't know if we said something like that right before we went on air at some point, but you know, right when things kind of get to that point where you know, even when you live somewhere and you've got everything perfect now, you know,
Right.
It took you 5, 6, 7 years, 8 years. You've got all the storage straight where everything goes. That's usually when you move.
Yeah, real talk.
It's like,
I feel that way about rap. Like I listen to some of the
Wow.
just listen back to some of the stuff that I've done more recent as far as more mature stuff I've done recently. I'm like, man, now I'm in my 40s and I got good. Like, what the heck, man? You know what I mean? Like,
Isn't that a weird thing? It's like a thing that happens to us as humans. It's like once you get to
Yeah.
that point, and I feel like with this, it might be that kind of a cycle where we'll get to that point where we're like, all right, I kind of got this, and you know, and that'll be the time when we've got to switch back,
yeah.
and then we'll just be hitting all these other things, and you know, from there, and that's the way it goes, bro. But
Absolutely.
I thank you for really going into a lot of that because
I appreciate it,
I
man.
mean it was sort of selfish of me because I was like
No, not at all.
I knew I had you as a resource, and I was like I am not gonna not talk about this because it's something so
No.
important like in my house right now. And I was like, I got Bobby on here, and I want to see what he has to say about this
Well, you
because I
already
knew,
know.
yeah, man. And also, by the way, congratulations. I mean, because you this was a vision you had. What you're doing right now, I
Mm,
remember when it was just a vision. I remember when you were like, Mike, I think I'm gonna go back to school. I think I'm gonna do this, and I'll tell you something, man. I knew you'd be great at it immediately. Like it was
thank you,
just
Carl.
like that's knowing you, your personality, how you are, and just the type of guy you are. I was like, that's when you told me it was just like that made perfect sense. It
Appreciate
made
that,
perfect
man.
sense, man. And I can see by the way you're talking, by the way you're explaining things, you know, all you've always been very thoughtful, and I can see that that's really. I'm sure you're very well liked by the kids
I appreciate
and a
that.
lot of people over there. I'm pretty sure you're making a big difference there.
Thank you.
You know, I
Thank you,
can't
man.
say from walking through the hallways,
Yeah.
but that gut we talked about in the beginning of the show,
Yeah.
that's what it's telling me. Uh,
I often say to the teachers who, how do I put it? I get to be the good guy a lot, so I try to acknowledge that with them. I'm like, listen, the most discipline I do is maybe in conjunction with like a restorative justice approach to any given situation, but that's the extent of it. For the most part,
mm,
I do get to be the good guy, and I know that. So I try to bring that balance to the conversation as far as, okay, if that's the case, then I got to make sure that I'm not afraid to challenge each individual kid and push them a little bit. That's kind of been
yeah,
my new goal. Like, okay, you don't have to be the good guy all the time. There are
yeah.
times when maybe
Sometimes
they
you have
actually
to
need
do
to
the
hear
other
something
side.
firm. Yep,
Yeah,
yep.
sometimes
I
you've got to be
appreciate
that
that.
villain.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
true
You know what's
because in
interesting
those
though?
moments they need one.
But I mean, because I can see how the internal work you did based on the song is pouring out into your social work
Mm, appreciate that,
about
man.
the villain, about seeing that,
Yeah.
about dealing with that, about coming out of it. Now you're in your world outside. You know, and we talk about that all the time on the show about how it's inside out. It's inside out. You want to be a better person for other people outside, and whatever you're trying to accomplish. It's got to come from the end. You want to love other people, you got to love yourself. Like you really want to love
Yeah.
people, like legit love them, like not love
Hmm.
them because you want to be a good guy and you want people to say you're a good guy, like legit love them. It's almost impossible if you don't legit love yourself to legit like really just be like, I just love this guy for the sake of I love him, or you know, or this person, or
Right.
this teacher, or you know, I just for the sake of it. And you can't get there unless you love yourself just for the sake of it, even when you mess up, even when you make a mistake. And I could see in your journey, you know, from the inside out, you know, even what you just said, I got to be that other guy sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's all from that growth
It's hard. It's
and
hard for me,
everything.
man. It's very hard for me.
We're very alike,
Yeah.
Bobby. That's hard
Yeah.
for me too. That's
Yeah. It's
very
tough.
hard,
I
but
have a student
it's
that
real.
it's just real. I have a student. Some of them they stick, right. You become emotionally invested because my room has become like a hub for kids, right. So they're the kids that pop in once every couple of weeks or once a month, but or just a triage. But there are other kids that my office is their home. So first thing in the morning, they come to my room and they drop their stuff off, and in between,
Mm,
they've just adopted as this is my hub, right? So inevitably, if you're seeing a kid every day for 4 years, when they graduate, there are kids that I stay up with, especially as
hmm
Lynn's not that big, whatever, probably 120,000 people, right? So in 4 square miles. So you're going to see them. And in some cases, I have these established relationships. So I'm like, I'm going to see you through, man. Like you're not just going to be gone here. You change the parameters, you set it up right. But I have one kid who recently kind of called me out because she was like, hey, she was like, I let after they graduate, they can call me B, right? So she's like, B, you didn't used to be hard on me like this. And she's like, "Why are you come?" Because she's in college, and I was like
Ah,
coming down on her for something. She's like, "Why?" I said, "Listen, we've got 4 years. I trust our friendship. I know that you're not going to ditch me, and I'm not ditching
yeah,
you either. So who else is going to say this to you? You know what I
yeah,
mean? Man?
yeah,
There's something so freeing in that, knowing that you can say something
yeah.
and they're not going to
You know
ditch
what? That reminds me of Stephen Covey. I don't know if
you.
I always I might be saying his name wrong, but he anyway he said something. I think it's in Seven Habits for Successful People or something like that. That book. He says, and I always remember this from that book. He said that in relationships, it's like credit, just what you just said. And
Mm,
he said that once you look at it like this, once you have, let's look at it like money, you've deposited like 100K, right? And once in a while, to help the person, even if you got to take a risk of taking out 20K, you got it.
mm,
But if you had zero, zero, nothing, and you
right,
came out harsh like that, there was no credit.
right,
So that's it. Goodbye. You're bankrupt. You got
right.
nothing. And so it's really wise, what you're saying. It's like, yeah, now I can because I've got that credit. You might have lost, you probably had like 500K in there, and she
Yeah,
might have took out like 40K. She was like, wait a second, I'm taking out 40K for Bobby. He's still got a big cushion, but
right, right, right,
I don't
right,
know. But she
right.
asked you, and
But
maybe
then
she
it
even
comes
put it
back
back.
tenfold.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Maybe
Once it
she,
goes full circle, it
yeah, she
comes
might have
back
put it back
tenfold.
and gone up more.
Yeah,
So
no doubt,
yeah, so I
man.
love that, man. But yo,
It's dope. It's
I
really
gotta
dope.
have you back on. I mean, there's so much we could talk about
It
spiritually,
is, man.
Christianity. I mean, we've had mad talks. So
Yep,
there's so much we could talk about, and we definitely.
love to.
I feel like we sit in the same sphere sometimes, and we and
Yeah,
we
yeah,
we bounce off each other very well. And sometimes there's people like that. There's people like that in my life sometimes. And I just get lucky. Like even Derek, like we do the show, and it came from us having lunches at work,
mm,
and we just would have these conversations, and we were like, but we get to say we started our podcast right before the pandemic, so we're not part of the pandemic
right,
podcast, so
right, right, right,
we
right. You
just
did.
missed it by I think of February 4th, so we just missed it. We were like a month before, and but yeah, man, and it's cool to have you on, and
It's
I
cool.
appreciate you. And
Thank you for
anybody,
having me.
check out Bobby Bishop's music. I mean, one my favorite song is "Everyday Man."
Thank
That
you,
will
bro.
always be my. You actually sang on that one, which is unusual, but that's not the reason that's my favorite. It's the content, the message of it, the feel of that, and it's very relatable for a lot of people who have. What I liked about that song a lot was, especially, it spoke to me a lot because I at that time being coming from that cult atmosphere and that
Mm,
very hyper authoritarian, and you just can't live up to anything. You're chasing this impossible carrot,
right,
and that really spoke to me because it was like, you asked my father for this, for that, and he said, "You're good." It's like
right.
it's back to the tuna sandwich, back to the chair.
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
fine.
Yeah,
I thought I told you. This you're good. You're
mm,
fine.
yeah. I
You're
already
you're
had you.
you're
Yeah,
mine. You're mine. You're good,
that's what it is.
and you're
That's
perfect.
bro. That means a lot to me, man. And I know, like you said, there are a million things we can get into. Just before I forget, from what Erica said and what you said, as far as outside of here, if you guys want to sit down and brainstorm ideas, if you're hitting walls as far as communication piece with your kids, with school stuff, say the word. I'd be
Oh,
down to,
thank you,
like,
man.
let's brainstorm. What do we
Well,
do?
listen,
So
Erica's watching, so she's already called. She's calling you Mr. B. So
that's
I
what's
don't
up,
know.
man.
So that's it. That's it, man.
But
I'm
as
sure
far
she's
as the
gonna
music
hold you to
piece,
it.
no, no, yeah, don't hesitate. But as far as what you just said, I was saying this to Anderson, my dude, who was a hype man for me for years. I was on his podcast the other day, and I actually brought you up as far as the fact that, to that theme of the everyday man piece of being content and knowing that you're okay, and that you're loved, right? And in that season, the one of the most humbling things for me was that you agreed to come on and do a record that wasn't going to be as high profile as from when you met me. Um, but creatively, Darren was like, do whatever you want. Like, you know what I'm saying? As far as, okay, you haven't made a record you wanted to make because of some disagreements or there wasn't flexibility there. Darren kind of gave me as you may recall, the freedom to be
Yeah.
like, make the record that's you. And the fact that you, with the pedigree that you have, didn't just say, yeah, I'll throw you some stuff, but you actually joined me in making that, like so much of that project was
Yeah,
always
man.
remarkable. It was so humbling. I'm like, why does this
Well,
dude even want to
we
work with me,
connected,
man? I got
man.
nothing to offer him,
Listen,
you know?
we connected. We
Who's-
connected, and I liked where you were coming from. And at the end of the day, like uh, one of the things that I'll say, if anybody's watching who's creative and wants to be successful, you've got to do kind of like what Bobby was saying, where you've got to do certain things to manage situations, be successful, pay your bills, make certain types of records or whatever. But to keep yourself happy and to remember why you do it, you've got to just do some projects just for that reason.
Mhm.
And that's how I saw your project. Like I did it,
Mhm.
we connected. We would have our conversations. I saw what you were doing, and and then I just like, yeah, I like where Bobby's coming from, and I like his energy and just the like we said in the top of the show, just the unreligious nature of you, as a believer, as a Christian. It was unreligious, and I always remembered it, because you actually, I mean, I don't want to say the only, but because then later on I'll remember someone else and I'll feel bad. But one of the few who was actually in the genre, because all the other people I connected with that I feel that I'm even still friends with used to be in the mainstream or used to be in the secular. So we had this connection.
Right.
Man, I'm gonna say I think you're the only one that I could have and that's what I love so much about the relationship, because it was like Bobby's 100% in the genre. Like he's 100% in it. Like he didn't come from here and then go there. This
Right.
is what he does. And you never, and all the people, listen, man, I don't want to, and I'm there, I go, all, never.
No, I got you.
But I'm
I know
going to
what you
tell
mean.
you, a large majority of the people who are entrenched in it are not in that energy. They're more in a closeness, in a this is our thing. You don't even get it, like, it's true. That was one of my frustrations, and to this day, I ended up never getting it. So I didn't get it, and then after all this time, I never got it, and I'm glad I didn't because
Bro.
it's not something I wanted to have.
Well, my perspective was it took me a long time to figure it out. I realized I didn't belong in it in the first place, and I had these impressions of what I thought it was going to, especially with the situation where we had the major label distribution and all this, and I was so mesmerized by the idea that I could be up there with these guys that I had come up watching, and suddenly they're sort of my peers on some level. And when I got there, I realized what you're saying. I'm like, oh, we have completely different convictions, and the the years of street outreach and having planted a church and all the places that I had invested my energies and where my heart was were not congruent with that. Um, and I had a moment where I was on a stage in Montana. I remember it so clearly, and it was a few thousand kids. I was doing some youth convention. Great purpose, great situation, great message, great everything. Wrong dude. As I remember thinking, I'm looking at the crowd. I'm going, why am I here? It's like this
Wow.
isn't where I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be in 01902. What am I doing over here right now? And I was naive enough to think that I think I thought that everyone kind of had that mentality. Like this is to augment what we're really doing. And you're right. the majority of them, they just wanted it to be right here. And like, yo, don't mess with my situation. We're gonna stay right here.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be there. It's like, why are we? There's a whole world out here. Why are we
But
staying here?
you know what? And I give you a lot of credit because I had a situation like that where that kind of hit me in a similar way, and I give you a lot of credit because when I look at my situation, I'm pretty sure yours too, because you did have you had a pretty good following. I mean, you really did, Bobby, and you know for those circles, and you could book things for years. You were booking things, and you know, meaningful ones in that genre, and for you to consciously make that decision from your heart, because in the mind and in the dollar, you could have also said, I don't need to be here, but you know what? I know how this works, and I know I can milk this. Because I think that, in my humble opinion, I think that's the wrong turn a lot of people make. I think they come to that same moment that I came to and you came to, but they say, just how we were saying sometimes you don't listen to your heart, your gut. I think they don't listen to the gut at that moment, and they say, but I understand how this works. This is where I'm at. And I know if I keep doing it, I can make this work for me.
The thing that's hard about that too, and again, it's funny because if I was home, when you're home and you're out there, I'm smart enough to know when to keep my guard up. You know what I mean? You can't trust every situation. You have to have a thick enough shell. But I did let my guard down in that season because I was naive enough to think that these were honest people. And like you said, and then I realized over the years how many times I got undercut. I got undercut constantly.
Yeah, man. There was listen, I was so naive. Like I got, you know, this idea to follow God and thinking that everyone else was on this high that I was on, and I was just like completely naive, completely.
I was.
And that's the truth of it. So I can relate, man.
That's a whole other podcast.
That's what I'm saying. But we just planted the seed for another one. So you got to come back, please.
Well, I would love to.
And on that next one, we can pick up where we left off.
Let's do it.
And thank you for coming. I don't want to hold you up anymore. I know you're on vacation.
Thank you for having me, man.
And say hello to your family. And
I will, likewise.
I hope you guys have a great time. And you deserve it, bro. And you got to get your energy up because when you come back,
go in.
It's still there, and those kids need you. And you know, I'm gonna roll out with this track one more time. And guys, you know, I highly recommend you check out his music. And we're gonna play this out. Thank you again, Bobby. Appreciate you.
Hey, thank you, man. Peace, Mike. Thanks, brother.
My altruism bound me in this prison. Motives lurking. Don't approach that intersection. Nervous. I'm lost if you're not doling me my props. A scared, agitated core. I'm alone with my thoughts. I'm alone with my thoughts. I'm alone with my thoughts. Ironic, found my altruism bound me in this prison. Local icon down and crawling in the bowels with the victim. Vocal, mic on, sound resounding, margins of the system. Ostracized, forgotten, dust them off without conditions. Motives lurking, heard them gurgling, murmuring at the surface. Forward motion, don't approach that intersection. Nervous, motor going, slow, encroaching, approaching the top. If I idle in the quiet, I'm alone with my thoughts. My title, my dream, be the cream of the crop. Strip me of my medals, I was dawn and ripped them off. Let up on that pedal, slowly rolling to a stop. Holding on, I'm lost if you're not doling me my props. Ill prepared for the storm, a scared, agitated core. Decidedly ignored, aggravated, buried in the corner. Excavation, hatred percolating, spilling over. Avoidance was the norm, anxiety is purest form. Facing my reflection, change direction. What I know, if I love enough, maybe I'll be lovable. Important, that cloud of doubt will drift away, replaced with rays of hope. Alarms will stop, my heart will feel the calm I'm longing for. Distracted by a shiny thing, a gleam across the street. Serenity, oasis, affirmation flowing free. And adoration isn't fabricated, those feelings real. temporary respite. Acceptance, how I feel. Granted, it's a momentary fix where I can ponder why absence didn't exactly make the heart grow fonder. Failure to handle with care, careless, stranded in the dust. So I'm going over there to rest in this chair in the sun. The sun eventually sets, apparent when it's dusk. Pulled out of my chair, it isn't fair, it hurts too much. Face the situation, I hate it there, I'm stuck. Rumination gets you nowhere, what's done is done. Is grace sufficient? Is mercy enough? Strip it down to the studs and reconstruct the trust. Stand it squarely on the rug pulled out from under me and start this living in the present and calm my anxious heart. A gleam across the street,